I'm Anakin, and welcome to the Horror Zone. This happened a few years ago, but I still get chills thinking about it. I was living in a small city, working late nights at a bar downtown. The bar was only a 15-minute walk from my apartment, so I usually walked home to save money on cabs. The city was pretty safe, and I never had any issues, so I didn't think much of it. One night, I finished my shift at around 2 a.m. It had been a slow night, and I was exhausted. I said goodbye to my co-workers, locked up, and started my usual routine home. The streets were empty, and the only sounds were the distant hums of traffic and my own footsteps. About halfway home, I had to pass by this narrow alleyway that always creeped me out. It was poorly lit, and the buildings on either side cast long dark shadows. Normally, I'd walk a little faster when I passed it, just to get it over with. But that night, as I approached the alley, I heard a noise that made me stop in my tracks. It sounded like someone shuffling their feet and moving slowly. My heart started to race. I looked down the alley, squinted to see if I could make out something in the darkness. At first, I saw nothing, but then I noticed a faint outline, a figure standing still, almost blending into the shadows. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but then the figure started to move, stepping slowly towards me. Panic set in, and I started walking faster. I didn't want to run and make it obvious that I was scared, but I could hear the footsteps behind me quickening. I glanced back and saw the figure emerge from the alley. There was a man wearing a hooded jacket that obscured most of his face. He was tall, with a lean build, and his movements were deliberate, almost predatory. I turned onto a busier street, hoping to find someone, anyone who could help me, but the streets were deserted. My apartment was only a few blocks away, but it felt like miles. I kept looking over my shoulder, and each time the man was a little closer. By the time I reached my building, I was practically sprinting. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I could hear his footsteps getting louder and closer. I finally managed to unlock the door and rush inside, slamming it shut behind me and locking it. I stood there, panting my back against the door, listening. I peeked through the peephole and saw nothing. The man was gone. I waited a few minutes, my heart pounding in my chest before I dared to move. I crept to my window and peered outside, scanning the streets for any sign of him. There was no one there. I felt a wave of relief, but it was quickly replaced by a deep sense of unease. Who was he? What was he following me? I never saw the man again, but I changed my routine after that night. I started taking cabs home, no matter how much it cost. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for another chance to catch me off guard. To this day, I avoid that alley, and I never walk home alone at night. It's a small price to pay for peace of mind, but sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't made it to my door in time. A few years ago, my partner and I decided to buy an old house in the countryside. We were both drawn to its charm, the creaky wooden floors, the large bay windows, and the overgrown garden that begged for a green thumb. It was our dream home, and we were eager to start our life together there. The first few weeks were blissful. We spent our days unpacking, painting, and exploring the surrounding woods. It wasn't until we started renovating the basement that things began to take a strange turn. One evening, as we were tearing down some old wooden panels, we found a small hidden door. It was no more than 3 feet high and covered in decades of dust and cobwebs. Curiosity got to the best of us, and we pried it open, revealing a narrow, pitch-black passageway. We grabbed our flashlights and crawled inside. The passage led to a tiny room with stone walls and dirt floor. In the middle of the room was an old wooden chest, covered in scratches and strange symbols. We hesitated, but eventually decided to open it. Inside, we found a collection of old yellowed photographs and a small fancy mirror. The photos were of the house taken decades ago, but in each one there was a dark figure standing in the background. It was hard to make out any details, but the figure seemed to be watching the photographer intently. We were both spooked, but tried to brush it off as some elaborate prank by the previous owners. We took the chest upstairs and stored it in the attic, not wanting to deal with it right away. That night, I was woken up by a cold breeze. I opened my eyes and saw the bathroom door slowly creeping open. My heart raced as I stared into the dark hallway, but there was nothing there. I told myself it was just the wind and went back to sleep. Over the next few days, things got worse. We started hearing footsteps in the hallway at night. Doors were slammed shut on their own, and we both had the eerie feeling of being watched. One evening, as we were having dinner, we heard a loud crash from the attic. We ran upstairs and found the old chest, its contents scattered across the floor. The mirror was shattered, and the photographs were everywhere. That was the last straw. We decided to call a local historian to see if he could shed some light on the house's past. When he arrived, he took one look at the photos and went pale. He told us the house had a dark history. In the late 1800s, the original owner, a reclusive man named William, was rumored to have dabbled in dark rituals. He disappeared one night, and the house had been sold multiple times since, each owner leaving abruptly without explanation. That night, we packed our bags and checked into an hotel. We couldn't stay in the house any longer. We eventually sold it at a loss, not caring about the financial hit. We just wanted to get rid of it. A few months later, I received a letter from its new owners. They wanted to know if we'd ever experienced anything strange in the house. I never responded. I didn't want to relive those memories, and I sincerely hope they wouldn't have to either. To this day, I can't explain what happened in that house. All I know is that something was there, something dark and evil, and I hope I never encounter something like that again. Last winter, I was house sitting for my aunt while she was on vacation. She lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, and I was looking forward to some peaceful solitude. The house was cozy with a fireplace and big, comfortable furniture. It was perfect for a week of reading and relaxation. The first few nights were uneventful. I settled into my routine, reading by the fire, making simple dinners, and enjoying the quiet. But one night around 2 a.m., I woke up to the feeling of being watched. It was an unsettling sensation, and I couldn't shake it off. I lay there in bed, straining to hear any sounds that may explain the eerie feeling. And then I heard it, the soft creak of floorboards. My heart started to race. I was certain I had locked all the doors and windows before going to bed. I reached for my phone and turned the flashlight. Slowly, I got out of bed and crept towards the hallway. The house was silent, and the feeling of being watched intensified. I checked the guest room and bathroom, both empty. And finally, I opened the door to the master bedroom, and my blood ran cold. There, standing in the middle of the room, was a man. His back was to me, and he was staring at the wall. I couldn't see his face, but he was muttering something under his breath. I stepped back, my heart started racing. I didn't have a weapon, and I didn't want to provoke him. I dialed 911, whispering my address and the situation to the operator. She told me to stay on the line and to get to a safe place if I could. As I backed away, the man suddenly stopped muttering. He turned his head slightly, as if he heard something. My heart pounded in my chest as I slowly moved down the hallway, trying to make it to the front door without making a sound. Just as I reached the living room, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. The man must have heard him too, because he let out a low growl and started moving towards the front of the house. I darted out the door and ran to the street, waving frantically at the approaching police cars. The officers quickly apprehended the man, which turned out to be a homeless person with a history of mental illness. He had somehow managed to get inside the house, likely through a window I had forgotten to lock. I was shaken but incredibly relieved that the situation hadn't escalated further. I never told my aunt the full story, only that there was a minor security issue. But I'll never forget the sight of the man standing in the dark, murmuring to himself, and the bone-chilling fear that came with it.